welcome to the Kemetic How-To Guide for Egyptian Pagan and Kemetic practitioners. I'm your host, Sharon. It's time once again for your favorite and mine, book reviews. Who's in? Who's out? Who gets to hear from our librarian? Let's find out, shall we? Our first entry is actually a good pick for that someone in your life who doesn't really know much about ancient history, and you want to give them sort of a soft intro. Empress of the Nile, the daredevil archaeologist who saved Egypt's ancient temples from destruction, by Lynn Olson. This book is sort of a biography of the French Egyptologist Christian de Roche-Noblecourt. And I have actually read her book, which is mentioned in here, Tutankhamun, Life and Death of a Pharaoh. But other than having read that book, I had no idea how cool Christian de Roche-Noblecourt actually was. She resisted the Nazis during World War II. She spearheaded the movement to save Abu Simbel from being flooded by the Aswan High Dam. And she is a major reason why we have so many cool museum exhibits from Egypt that tour nowadays. And there are great stories in here from her field work that she did in Egypt in the mid-20th century. 3 words, Johnny Walker Cobra. It's in here, read it. My only quibble with this book, and it's a minor one really, is that the author of this book kind of played up the connection between de Roche-Noblecourt and Jackie Kennedy, because the two women only met after Jackie Kennedy became Jacqueline Onassis. But apparently, Jackie O was a bit of an Egyptophile. I did not know that. And when she was married to President Kennedy, they wanted to try and get one of the temples that was being saved from the floodwaters for the Potomac in Washington, D.C. That temple is now in the New York Metropolitan Museum. That story is in here too. And another thing I learned from here, leave it to a crooked Louisiana politician to tell someone what legal loophole they needed in order to fund the U.S.'s contribution for the Abu Simbel rescue project. It's all in here. Overall, a very well-written book. And again, it's great for all audiences. If you know someone that doesn't know, Dendera from a hole in the ground, they can still read this and get a great sense of what the field of Egyptology is like. There's a little bit in here about things that they found in Deir el-Medina, and also, hey, we're fighting Nazis. Can't go wrong here. So many great things in this book. This is actually something from Barnes & Noble that you'll want to keep. Now, our next book is more of a specialist book, but this is an overlooked gem for Kemetics. And this is Wretched Kush, Ethnic Identities and Boundaries in Egypt's Nubian Empire by Stuart Tyson Smith. Now, Stuart Tyson Smith is an Egyptologist, and he's also African American. And I know this because that fact was mentioned in other books by other Egyptologists. Ordinarily, I don't think that would really have any bearing on the subject, but this professor has done what I like to call putting your money where your mouth is. And what that means is, rather than just post angry online rants about how wrong and how biased Egyptology is, he went to school at UC Berkeley and UCLA, got his doctorate, and has done field work in Sudan. Highly impeccable field work, judging from this book. Anyone can stand on the fringes and point to the establishment and say, well, you're all wrong. But the moment you do that, the onus is on you to prove why you're right. If the establishment really is wrong, then use their own arguments, dissect them, turn their own work against them. If you're right, you can do that. But the only way to do that is to jump in there and beat them at their own game. And that's what Stuart Tyson Smith has done. Except, funny thing here, he calls out by name Cheikh Anta Diop, who, if you will remember, was the scholar from Senegal that has been widely quoted by Afrocentrists and by our folks that we reviewed talking about Sekhmet books. Dr. Smith points out that Afrocentrists like Cheikh Anta Diop are using the same wrong-headed arguments that once put down African cultures and really just flipping them the opposite way, but they're still wrong. And in defining ethnicity, Dr. Smith also points out that race does not equal ethnicity. Now, I will say, at first when I read this, I didn't quite gel with his definitions that he cites for what is ethnicity. But when I went back and I reread it, and I was thinking about some of the rather bruising and inflammatory arguments that I have heard over what makes someone a real Cajun, when I had that in mind as I was reading his definition of ethnicity, suddenly it made sense. But this book's real value to anyone who's interested in Egyptian religion comes from his description of an Egyptian outpost town in Uskut in Nubia, and this is in chapter 5. He maps out a small chapel that ordinary Egyptians used, and on page 129 he gives an actual photograph of, as it was discovered, a household shrine from the house of a man named Marika. And on page 132 he includes a diagram of it, and I'll show that up here. Folks, this is the closest anyone has come to giving us a layout of an ancient Egyptian shrine as it would have been used by ordinary Egyptians. This is what we're trying to reconstruct right here. Now, what I find significant is that both the chapel and the home shrine had 2 incense burners in them. It made me think of the more formal rituals that we have written record of that offer incense and then myrrh. Could this have been an important theme that had something maybe to do with duality, and it was so significant that even in a household shrine they still observed this? It's the kind of thing that opens up even more questions, and questions that are very fruitful and very pertinent for us interested in Egyptian religious practice. Now, another thing that I found interesting in here, in the home shrine of Marika, there was a drain on the offering slab that opened out to a ceramic pot in the floor. So it seems that, at least for some rituals, water was poured over something and then allowed to drain and evaporate. Now, how many of our strict recon pagans actually incorporate that into their practice? This is why it's so important to see things like this, because, believe it or not, all of those temple records for the services, to Amun and to Mut and to the ritual of Amenephis I and all those things, those only give you a part of the picture. This gives you an important but overlooked part, and it's right here in his book. So, folks, this book is worth the $40 or so US that it costs. It's a great read. Again, it's more of a specialist book because of some of the things that he breaks down in there. He gives a lot of statistics and numbers and things, but he does that in order to cite the point that he's trying to make. This is what science is supposed to be about. Data that somebody can look at, and if you disagree with it, you can go and look at the same data and you can use it to support your own point. But again, it's information that we don't have. It's very hard to find publications of what did shrines look like, what was left of them as archaeologists found them, but he's got it right here. And now for our third book. This was a viewer-nominated title. Myths of Ancient Egypt, Gods and Pharaohs, Creation and the Afterlife, by Catherine Chambers. So, I got this book, started to read it, and it was painful. Where do I start with this book? Okay. Her topics are not completely well organized to my reading sensibilities here, she uses a lot of statements that are value judgments, which is not good when you're writing historical nonfiction. And she even quotes disputed material when she bothers to quote material that she's using. I don't know where she gets some of this stuff. Some of it, like okay, again, I'm just picking things out of here. Saying that Anubis, the jackal-headed god of the desert and guardian of the mountain, moreover, as his name means decay. No it doesn't. There's actually some debate about what does Anubis's name, Anipu, come from, but they think that it has to do with either the crown prince, or someone suggested it might be an onomatopoeia for a puppy's bark. Something, maybe, I don't know. Somebody was really creative with that one, but that's actually in another book I could point out to you. Nowhere has anybody suggested his name means decay, which kind of was anathema to Egyptians wanting to be mummified anyway. But that's just one little crazy thing in here. You have this other thing here. The blue-green of Seshat's hair represents protection. Okay, for one, she does a lot of trying to interpret images in here, and this could have been a wig, this could be a wig cover, a headdress that was dyed blue. She's kind of playing fast and loose with some things here. And there's other stuff that I read and I'm like, what? And I couldn't even go back and find it again, and I don't want to because it's painful. And she also points to the image of the sun god as a child in the disc with his finger to his lips and says that he has his finger to his lips to silence the newly created world. Again, no. The ancient Egyptians pictured children with a finger to their lips to suggest a child sucking on their finger. They don't always suck on their thumbs. They'll suck on other fingers too. The Egyptians saw lots of small children scampering around. They were theirs, and so they pictured them in art doing what little kids do, sucking on their finger, not going, shh. That is more of a culturally specific gesture. And if this author has lived in all the places that her biography says she has, including Australia, England, northern Nigeria, southern Europe, you should know that not all gestures mean the same thing. As there are some that I can use that are perfectly okay to my American and European viewers, but somebody in another part of the world might be like, hey, you just said something naughty, so I'm not going to do that. Because I know better! And in the last part of this book, back here, I don't even want to go into it. In the last part of this book, she tries to make the case that the fleur-de-lis symbol comes from the Egyptian lotus symbol. And that's actually talking about heritage from my part of the world. And I want to say, hey, couyon, listen. That's our symbol, yo. Bark up another tree. There's been an argument because you had coins stamped in the Levant during the Hellenistic period that had something that looked an awful lot like a fleur-de-lis, that, oh well, just because that showed up first and then you had the fleur-de-lis, they must all be connected, right? Let me introduce you to a logical fallacy that has cropped up so often there is a Latin name for it. Post hoc ergo propter hoc, which means after the fact, therefore because of the fact. Oh, because this came afterwards. It had to be because of something else, right? No. I put it a more simple way. Similarity does not equal causality. And our author really should have known this. What really ticks me off about this book is that the author here she's gotten work editing titles of other books relating to ancient Egypt. She has a degree in African history and Swahili from the School of Oriental and African Studies at University of London. A degree is probably a bachelor's, which means she's only as educated as I am. I have a bachelor's and I know this and she doesn't! Why? Somehow her degree sounds sexy enough for her to get a book deal, when obviously there's not enough interdisciplinary study going on, and interdisciplinary collaboration going on between African studies and Egyptology. And if there was, then maybe she would have made some of the dopey mistakes that she has in here. And again, this is something I can say about academia overall. There's not enough collaboration between, say, Egyptologists and Assyriologists, and obviously not between Egyptologists and other folks specializing in African studies. And if you want to make the case that, oh, well, Egypt is an African country, it should be under African studies, well, then y'all need to compare notes, slip some notes back and forth in class, something, please, because this ain't cutting it. Now, the only reason why I am not out in the backyard right now with some fireworks in this book is because it has some really beautiful photographs in it, including some photographs of some rather obscure artifacts, including some things from the very beginning of Egyptian history, like jar labels with King Den, and this is picturing the oldest representation of the Sed festival. There's also a picture of a statue in here of Wepawet and Isis, and actually in the inscription she's being identified with Hathor. Very interesting stuff here, and so, I hate to say it, but the value of this book is in the pretty pictures. So otherwise, let's see what our keeper of the Library of Shame has to say.
How far we've fallen. God, how far we've fallen. The next thing you know, kids will talk with their thumbs. But I digress. This book was wonderful. It had great pictures, and it was useful in one other area of my house. Do you mind?
So there you have it. If it's a good book, I'll tell you. But if it's a bad book, I'll tell you. And I'll tell you why. And I have plenty of other books to review as the year goes on. And I'm also trying to make note of things that people are requesting for video topics. So I'm going to have plenty of things to do throughout the year. If you haven't hit subscribe, do that so that you don't miss out on all of my fun topics and all my fun book reviews. Stay tuned, because in April we're going to be going in the field to tape the big solar eclipse that's happening right through the middle of North America. And we're going to be out there taping it for you to see. I also want to thank all of my folks that have given me super stickers and super thanks. Give you a happy dance. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Also, please join us on Patreon, because there you'll also get to see not only outtakes from things like this, we'll certainly have some behind the scenes when we go to do the eclipse video, and a few things in between. Right now, what I'm showing folks is the progress I'm making on my animation project for my sister channel, Golden Age Video. So if you want to be in on that action, then head on over to Patreon. The link is in the description as well. And be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, give it a like, share it with your friends, of course, and you can always join us on Fridays when we have our live streams. And of course, we will be seeing you next month, where we'll be reviewing some comics. That's going to be interesting. So, for the Kemetic How-To Guide, this is Sharon, wishing you Senebti. Enjoyed this video? Then be sure to hit like and subscribe to the Kemetic Independent channel. You can also buy my books on Lulu.com, and special thanks to all my Patreon supporters. Join us for updates, outtakes, and exclusive videos only on Patreon. Check the description for links.
Cannot believe what I'm seeing!